So this video is intended to show you how I use my KR7 Knitradar with my LK150 knitting machine. So here is the KR7. It's the bigger of the two Knitradars. There's the KR6 and the KR7. And there's also the electronic ones, the 10, 11 and 21. Which are much easier to use because they just plug into the back of the row counter, but this is how to use one of the manual machines. So there are basically two problems that you have to solve to use one of these machines. The first problem is simply that there's no fixing for it on the machine. The big knitting machines have little studs that will position it correctly, but you don't have those on the LK150. So instead, if you look, I have actually screwed a plate, which is just a little bit of plywood, to the back of to the knitting table behind my machine. I had to do a bit of experimenting to get it at the right height, but basically I had some thin plywood which had come as packing with some shelves that I bought, and I just tried different piles of that until I got it the right height, and I'll demonstrate now what the right height is. So I've got two little screws emerging from it which are at the right intervals to connect to the bottom of the machine, and I just slide it on and push back in exactly the same way as I would if I had one of my bigger machines which has that fitting already there. And the crucial point is that the row counter tripper has to trip that as it goes past. So it's at the right height. You can hear two clicks. The first click is the row counter. The second click is the Knitradar. So you need to play with the height of whatever your little platform is, and to get this thing at the right height for the row counter tripper to trip it. And that's fairly straightforward. It's not hard. It does mean fixing it somehow to your knitting machine table. Obviously if you use it on the dining room table, that's going to be a different issue than if you use a dedicated machine knitting table. If I had to do this on another table, I think I would experiment with blue tack instead. I have heard somebody else on Facebook has said that they have fixed theirs in place perfectly okay just by putting it on blobs of blue tack, and that would obviously then not damage the table. But because this is just for my knitting machines, I'm fine with screwing it in place, and then if I need to move it when I get my bigger knitting machines out, that's fine, I'll just unscrew it. So that's the first problem solved. You've got it fixed at a suitable height behind the machine so that it will click as you go past. And for most of your knitting, with yarns up to double knitting weight, that's all you need to do. So for instance, I've got a piece here which a tension sample which I knitted from double knitting, and so it's given me a result of 22 stitches and 30 rows to 10 centimeters. So then I just set the machine, the KR7, in exactly the normal way. I just turn the dial. So this dial says, is your rows between 30 to 60, or is it between 61 to 120? Well, mine is between 30 and 60, so I've got it set on that. And then this one says, what exactly is your row count? And you just turn it until it points to 30, which is my row count, so that's fine. And then my pattern that I'm going to be using is a half scale pattern, so this lever on the back goes to half scale. I'll just pause this for a minute while I get a pattern. No, I don't know how to do that. Okay, I won't. I can't get the pattern out, so I'm going to add that in later. So I will just demonstrate how that would work. So it goes along like that, and all the time it's feeding the pattern up through in the normal way. If this was a pattern, you'd be able to see it. The stitches, now if you were lucky, you have the stitch gauges that came with your machine, with your KR7. You might have 2 sets. So the yellow ones in my case are half scale and the green ones are full scale. So if you recall from my swatch, it was 22 stitches per inch. So I've got 2 22 stitch things there, a yellow one and a green one, but I know that I need to use the yellow one because I'm going to be using a half scale pattern. So I would only use the green one if I was using a full scale pattern, which would mean it was quite a small item that I could fit the whole picture on there. So that's going to be in there. Whoops, no it's not. It's going to be in there. And then I would just line up the pattern with the 0 at one side and read off the stitches. So that's quite simple. To do that, to use that particular yarn, we didn't have to do anything very clever other than just work out a way of fixing the Knitradar onto the table. There is another complication though, which is that these Knitradars were designed for standard gauge machines. They weren't designed for mid gauge machines like the LK150. So although that swatch that I knitted came out with a row gauge that was within the limits of this dial, I don't know if you can see, but 30 is the lowest number on that dial. So if I'd used a thicker yarn than that and got fewer rows per inch, I'd have been thinking, oh well, I can't use that, how can I use that? But there is a way, and the KR7 actually makes it quite easy. So I'll just get another swatch. So this is a thicker swatch. This is actually one I knitted on my KR100, on my LK100, which is the Zippy 90, which is the chunky version of this. And on this I got 16.5 stitches and 23.5 rows. So 23.5 rows, I can't do that. How can I can't go down any further. It's already on the lowest number. So to get 23.5, I have to basically trick the machine. It's only the rows that I'm thinking about at the moment. So I'm thinking, how can I get 23.5 rows? Well, there are 2 ways. I could rig up a second row counter so that in effect it flipped that an extra time every time it went across, or if I wanted to, I could just flick it with my finger an extra time every time it went across, and that would work. That's because in effect it would move the paper twice for every row. Or because this is the KR7, it's got a choice between full size and half size, if I can trick it by telling it it's a full size pattern. So I've just moved that lever at the back to 1 by 1, which means full size. And then I set the row counter, the row counter to double the number that I've got on my swatch. So my swatch, I got 16.5 stitches. So twice that is going to be 33 stitches. Sorry, rows. 30. Twice that will. Oh, sorry, I'm doing the stitches. Sorry, 23.5 rows. I thought it didn't seem right. So twice 23.5 is 47. So I then set this. I set the row count dial to 47. So I've got that set to 47. I've got this set to full size 1 by 1, but I'm going to still put a half scale pattern in. So what that will do is, because it thinks it's a full scale pattern, it will actually move the it will move it twice as much basically as it would if it thought it was a half size pattern, and so that will trick it. And instead of measuring 47 in the end, it will measure what I want, which is 23.5 rows. And then the stitch gauges are usually less of a problem, because there are chunky stitch gauges around which you can download from the internet if you don't actually have them. But if by any chance you don't have them, then you can do a very similar thing with that, and you can so what stitches would I want on this? I would want 16.5 stitches. So let's look what I've actually got in my bundle. So I have got a 16.5 in fact, so that wouldn't have been a problem. But if by any chance I needed one that I didn't have a thing for, then I can, again, you can just kind of work it out by using one that has double the number and then only counting them as half stitches instead of stitches. But as I say, the stitches are not usually a problem. It's usually the rows that are the problem, and this is the easiest get around on the KR7, just to use the full size setting at the back but use a half scale pattern, and to set your rows at twice what you actually want. So I will probably make another video which will actually demonstrate how that works. I'm not quite sure which parts of it you would like me to expand on, so let me know what you'd like to see a bit more of, and I can expand on that.